All right. So as mentioned, we're talking about the aggregate supply curve. So what is it? Again, like aggregate demand, which was a relationship between price and quantity demanded for all goods and services in the economy, this is going to be the reverse. This is the relationship between price and quantity supplied for all goods and services in the economy. So everything that is supplied within the economy, so all the things that are produced essentially, the sum of everything produced by every business within whatever economy you're looking at, whether it's the United States economy, whether it's the world economy, that's your aggregate supply. Okay, it's a relationship between price and a quantity, some level of output, right? This relationship specifies a level of output for every price. If the price is $50, you should be able to tell based on the supply curve what the quantity supplied is. If the price is $30, you should be able to tell by that same supply curve what the quantity supplied is. Okay, so it's essentially a line or a curve, right? Plotting a relationship between price and quantity supplied. Okay, and just like the aggregate demand curve, price is going to be on the y-axis. Quantity supplied is going to be on the x-axis. Okay, and we are going to take, so once again, what goes on the, let's do this for y'all at home. Okay, what goes on the x-axis? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have it here. That would be helpful. What goes on the x-axis? Text. I'm just kidding. I just want to make this a different color so that it's not, so that you can actually see it. All right. What goes on the x-axis? Okay. Your quantity supplied. Okay. And how do we measure quantity supplied? We're going to measure it with your output. And what do we measure output in? We're going to measure it in GDP. Okay. So they're all the same thing here. Okay. So we either say GDP or output. Okay. Why wouldn't we say quantity supplied? The obvious answer to that is because often we're going to want to graph the supply curve with the demand curve. So having quantity supplied on the x-axis doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay. So we're going to just write GDP for short. But you should understand that GDP is output. It's also your income, right? Your national income, right? We've shown that like a bunch of times when we did the aggregate expenditure model in the 45-degree line, right? So your GDP is your output, it's equal to income, your national income. Is equal to your aggregate expenditure. Okay. All those things are true, right? We've shown that with the 45-degree line bisecting the axis and crossing with the aggregate expenditure line, right? That condition must be true. That's why the 45-degree line exists. You can't have national income that isn't generated by some level of profit or rent or wage, right? And those profit, rents, or wage go towards consumptions, investments, government expenditure, net exports, and imports. Net exports includes imports, but exports minus imports. And I'm not going to spend more time on that. I think I beat that one to death. But so we're just going to rely for the rest of the course, more or less, with GDP as your quantity of output here. Okay. And then what goes on the, where'd it go? Doesn't matter. What goes on the y-axis? Well, we said price. Okay. How do you measure price? You measure with some index. So CPI could be your price index. It could be CPE or PCE or some other price index. But in general, just think of it as the broad concepts of output in GDP, real GDP, and price in some type of index. Okay, so your aggregate supply is going to be a line. Woohoo! Okay, and it's going to map some price level. So no matter where you are on the y-axis, it should be able to tell you what the output is. Okay, what firms want to produce. Okay, so if the price level is here, your production is going to be at this point here. If your price level is here, your production is going to be at this point here. Okay, and then you're going to find, this is kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but if I bring in aggregate demand here, some equilibrium price level that will kind of stabilize the economy. Okay, that's your equilibrium. We've talked about that before. I'm not going to talk about it too much right now. We'll talk about it again later in the lecture, but that's how you find like the stable price level so that you can find a equilibrium price and output. Okay. But in general, supply, your supply curve maps your price to GDP or your output for every firm, every producer, or whatever in the economy for all possible price levels. Okay, in some specified period of time, all other determinants being constant. Okay, so if, for instance, interest rates change, right, that's going to change your supply, because essentially the rate of investment is going to change, right? So depending on if it goes up or goes down, it might have an effect. Okay. Interest rates are probably better for investments than the supply curve, but it does matter. Okay, so probably I didn't pick the best example there, but we'll talk about that more later. Anyway, at any rate, but your supply curve can shift. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. The aggregate supply curve slopes upwards, right? Demand curve slopes downwards. Supply curve slopes upwards. So just like how we said the demand curve slopes downwards, because at higher price levels, this diminishes consumers' ability to pay for certain goods. It leads to a wealth effect, decreases consumption, which then decreases aggregate expenditure, leading to a decrease in the demand. Just like that, the opposite is true for aggregate supply. The higher the price level is, essentially the more projects you can take on, the more profitable those projects are. So all things being considered, all things equal, the higher the price, the higher the profit. The higher the profit, the more firms that want to enter the market, the more firms are going to supply. Okay. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to show that now. All right, so firms base their decisions based on per unit profit. Unit profit we're going to just define as the price per unit minus the unit cost. Okay, unit is one good or one unit of service, so like maybe 1 hour of waiting a table or something like that. Okay, so unit profit is price per unit minus unit cost. Unit cost would be your inputs, so your capital, your labor, your technology. Okay, if you increase the price per unit, so that's what you're getting paid, right, per the thing you're selling, then you're increasing the profit. Okay, assuming that firms' inputs are purchased at prices that are not very flexible, okay, then you're making more profit per unit, right? This bad boy is going up. This is staying the same, so profit's increasing. Profit's increasing, more firms are going to enter, okay, And those firms that are already in the market are going to want to produce more as well. Okay. So if more firms are producing more, then production will go up. Production goes up, supply goes up. Okay. So that's why the, I should say quantity supply goes up. So that's why the quantity supply increases with the price level. So that's why you have a graph that looks like this. Okay. So the higher the price level, the more profit per unit, the more people are going to produce. Okay. The higher the quantity supplied. Okay. So let's do an example right quick. Okay. So imagine your only cost is labor. Okay. So there's no capital. You don't have to buy tables. You don't have to buy physical machinery or anything like that. It's just labor. Okay. So maybe this is like a temp firm. Okay. So that's the only input for production. Okay. Your profit is going to be your price times your quantity minus the wage times your labor hours specifically. Okay. So the price per good times the number of goods you sell minus the wage per hour times the number of hours people work. Okay, that's going to determine your profits. So if we want to look at profits per unit, okay, suppose each worker produces A units of output, okay, so then your quantity is going to be A times your labor hours. Okay, so we're going to replace, so basically a worker produces A units of output per hour. Okay, they're working L hours. So we're going to throw this bad boy in here. So your profits per unit is going to be P times A times L minus W times L. Okay. In fact, I'm going to show you on the slide itself, but I just want to do it with y'all over here for a second. Okay. So we have profits equals price times quantity. It's now just Q minus wage times labor. Okay. Q equals A units per hour times labor hours. Okay. So profits equals price times A units times L. Let's just use the P times A times L minus W times L. Okay, let's just use the abbreviations at this point. I think you all know what they are. Okay, so profits equal P times A minus W. Take that whole thing, PA times W times L. So profits equals so profits per, I forget where I was going with this. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry about that. So I want to retain quantity. I don't know why I took that out. Okay, so JK on this guy here. Sorry about that. Profits equals price times Q minus, we're going to take L and we're going to get rid of L actually. So let's reframe this bad boy as L equals Q divided by A. So then we have profits equals P times Q minus W Q divided by A. We're going to divide both sides by Q. So profits per unit is what we're getting back to, is equal to P minus W divided by A. Okay. The units you make per hour, so basically the effectiveness of a worker divided by their wage. Okay. So if wages don't change, right, then any increase in P is going to increase your profits. Okay. So one thing to note, in the long run, wages are going to change. Okay. We assume that wages are sticky within a year time frame about. In the long run, wages will adjust. So you can think of the supply curve, and I'm kind of jumping the gun here too as well, but you can think of the supply curve in the short run to be upward sloping, but in the long run, it's going to be just a straight line. Okay. All right. But that's why slope is a positive, because essentially, if your input costs don't change, the higher the price, the higher the profit. The higher the profit, the more you want to produce. Okay. Why are input prices not very flexible? We assume that there are long-term labor contracts. Wages are set usually about annually. This is kind of changing in like the last maybe decade or so. It's becoming more and more and more like contracts, or the terms are becoming smaller and smaller. So you'll see a lot of firms are doing like 3 months to hire, 6 months to hire contracts, where they'll put you in like a 6-month period where you're a temp worker. Or you'll see firms that are largely temp based now, or things like Uber that are gig economy type stuff. Those are becoming more and more normalized, which has ups and downs. Largely, I think they're with the government as it is. I think it's not a great thing, because I think that's a reason to just deny people health care. But it does save businesses cost and allow them to be a little more flexible. I guess I showed my hand there. But that's a whole other discussion. I don't want to talk about healthcare policy right now. But you'll largely this is becoming not irrelevant, but less impactful as it was before. But nonetheless, it's still the prevailing model that people get more long-term contracts. Next up, raw materials and inputs in general are more or less kind of defined. Usually you have some sort of contract there as well. So you prearrange your input prices, whether they're raw materials or capital. Okay. Capital you usually invest in advance. Energy is probably the one exception. That's why oil prices are so variant. Just because energy is like a really hot commodity. If you make the prices too rigid, you're really kind of losing out, and or it's not just losing out; it's just really inefficient for producers and consumers as well. All right, I think that's yeah. All right. So I'm going to talk in the next video about aggregate supply shifts.